Tremors in the night. A feline runs in fright, hiding out of sight. But soon it is found, shivering in fear. And when it looks around, its foe's already here. Run, young feline, run! You have to get away! For this beast is never done until it snags its prey.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Dougs and Digettes, today we are looking at Monster Hunters and Monster Hunties. Can't forget you guys either. Haha, it's your boy. We are looking at Anjanath today, aka my man Andrew. He came back from Monster Hunter World to bless us, if you will, with his presence in Monster Hunter Rise. So, for those who've never actually fought Andrew before, Anjanath, I'm calling him Andrew. I literally cannot pronounce Anjanath, even though I did like 3 or 4 times. Nevertheless, Andrew was a monster who made his debut in Monster Hunter World. Now, he was what I lovingly refer to as a gatekeeper. What is a gatekeeper? A gatekeeper is a monster wherein which they throw down in front of you, and then you're like, dang, everything was kind of easy, but like, why is he so hard? You know what I mean? Essentially that. Like, in this game, he's not so much that. If anything, I guess you can say they buffed him, put him in a tier 3 state, wherein which before he was technically a tier 2 monster, not even quite a tier 3, even though he was just as dangerous as any tier 3 monster. Nevertheless, I'm not going to really go into the tiering of monster, just know that Anjanath is a pretty significant monster fight. Now, moving over, what we're going to look at today is Anjanath in his form in Monster Hunter Rise. Needless to say, it's about the same thing. I fought him quite a few times, and quite honestly, I couldn't honestly tell you a true worthwhile difference between Rise and World. I can think of one. There's this one particular combo that he will do. It's not really worth mentioning. It's just he'll do his swipes a little slower, a bit more concise as a combo, as opposed to just like he'll just do the swipe and forget about it. It's a very nuanced thing. I'm just gonna note to you that anytime you see him rearing his head up and looking like he's going to bite you, you don't want to get hit with that, okay? Because he hits pretty hard. He has a lot of relative glancing blows, but for the most part, because he's a brute weapon, he does have a tendency to do a lot of damage. His hardest hitting attack is actually this attack where he kind of rears up really high, and then he just like digs his nose all into the ground and kind of like drags it along or whatever, like bulldozing the ground, if you will. If you see him doing that, if you get hit by that, if you're not at like full health or like at least 80% health, you're probably gonna take a fat L. Okay, it hurts a lot. Just please stay away from the nose when you see him like rearing up and like slamming against the ground and kind of dragging it against the dirt and whatnot. That's when he's gonna do the big nasty. Now, speaking of the big nasty, he sneezes. When he sneezes, he shoots fire. This is one thing that did change from Iceborne to Rise relatively significantly, wherein which in World he would do the exact same thing. Granted, when he would do it, you would almost never, like ever, get hit by it. Now they concentrated more to a relative beam. Before it was kind of like this weird, wavy, mostly vertical attack. Again, you would never get hit with this thing. I don't even know what the heck he was aiming at, but it's not the same. He has a proper beam. Like, I don't know. It's kind of weird because before it would come from his nose. Now I'm pretty sure it actually comes from his mouth this time. Nevertheless, the beam is a more concentrated thing. You can really see it come out. You can see him charging it up. There's lots of tells to it, so you'll know what to look for when he actually starts throwing it out. To do your best against him, though, you're going to want to do a lot of damage to his head. You want to break his, well, first damage his head, then break his nose. Those are the 2 breaks on his head. Do this and you're going to be granted his fangs. His fangs aren't his rarest material, but they're some of the more uncommon materials, and that's a surefire way to get them. It's not a means to actually stop him from breathing the fire. It's just a great amount of damage because his weak spot is his nose, the little fin thing on top of his head. So just do a lot of damage to the head. Now, when it comes to the relative elemental type you're gonna really want to use, honestly, I usually do a little bit more research, but I'm pretty certain it's still water, and that water is going to be, again, on the head. If not, I think you can use thunder in a pinch, I think. I don't know. I should know. This is a video of me teaching you how to fight this guy, but for the most part, if you're fighting him, if you've made it this far, I'm almost certain you can kind of go in here with whatever you really have at hand and do a relatively decent job. All it really comes down to is understanding what the monster can and cannot do, which I'm teaching you. It's what I'm doing right now. That's what's happening. So outside of all his standard favorite attacks, he's a brute wyvern, and he looks very much against like that of like a standard dinosaur. So he does have small things like where he'll like use his feet to like try to maim you or whatever. His most notable attacks again come from him using his head, like slamming the ground and like dragging it all over the place and doing large amounts of damage. He can breathe fire. He does have a leaping attack that is actually pretty devastating, even on block, might I add, so you really don't want to get hit with that. Outside of that, I think that's essentially everything in terms of his attacks. He does have a pinning attack, so you might want to watch out for the pinning as well. How you know he's going to do the pinning attack? It looks like he's going to go and bite you, but he takes way too long to kind of do the bite attack. Other than that, that's essentially all the attacks that he actually has. But for the most part, he isn't, in my opinion, too overbearing. In the beginning, when you first fight him, like back in Monster Hunter World, he was more overbearing because, again, he was a gatekeeper. He was put in a particular position where in which most monsters around him were nowhere near close to this particular power level. Granted, now that's the case. I mean, you fought Magnamalo before you get to fight him, Zenogre, Nargacuga, Mizutsune, all these grand beasts, where in which I feel he's supposed to be inclined to actually be right along with. So nevertheless, you shouldn't have too much difficulty fighting him, and he isn't that difficult of a monster. But let's say you do fight, you do win, you come out with some dubs, you're gonna want to make some gear. Let's take a look at it because it's pretty solid. It's actually, if I'm not mistaken, like gun sword, great sword, and hammer gear. Okay, so right off the rip, we're gonna look at the armor. The armor is actually kind of nice. If you run hammer or great sword, it has your back. And here's the thing, for the first time in like forever, we're going to talk about both the low and the high rank gears, because it's been 1,000 years since I made any kind of videos, and by now most people are in high rank. So for the most part, we're just going to discuss both. Now, for the most part, low rank and high rank, they're the exact same. They literally only add one extra point to all his skills. As you can see, we're looking at focus, slugger, marathon runner, and attack boost, and that's in low rank 2, 2, 2, 3. And then we're moving over to the same skills 3, 3, 3, 4. So they're maxed out on the top 3, and then there's a couple of more in attack boost. I think it goes all the way to 7 or something like that. So I mean, not bad. Right off the rip, looking real good for a weapon type that can use just the brunt force of those skills, which would more likely be hammer or maybe even greatsword, because slugger's nice on greatswords and whatnot. Now moving over to the weapons. Now the weapons, for the most part, the one thing to really note is that he has essentially every single weapon except lance, charge blade. I think just lance and charge blade. And for the most part, the one thing to note about his weapons, we're gonna look at the greatsword here.
Ready.
For the most part, they're all just beefy slapper sticks, you know what I mean? What I mean by that, I mean, where's this stuff?
Are you foraging or upgrading?
Oh, there it is. I'm like, dude, I know he has a greatsword. So maxed out the greatsword sits at 220. Believe it or not, this is one of the lower damage weapons that he actually has. Most weapons that he actually has sit around like 230 completely maxed out. And I believe like 140 if you're just getting started. So at the time, if you're just getting started, 140 should be roughly on the much higher end. The problem with weapons like this is that they tend to have a negative trait. That negative trait is usually either the trade-off to affinity or sharpness, and in some cases both. For Anjanath, it's a bit of both. He does have quite a bit of element, but you're going to lose out on sharpness. Even completely maxed out, you're going to lose out on sharpness. That tiny sliver of blue essentially goes with everything he has, even all the way to the longsword, even all the way down to the insect glaive. It all has a tiny sliver of blue, but it all sits at around 230 attack, which is some of the highest in the game. So if you're looking for a high attack with high fire, and you're not necessarily worried too much about affinity, because let's say for whatever reason you mitigated it between skills or whatnot, then the Anjanath weapons could be for you. Okay, so to wrap it all up, we're looking at Andrew. Andrew is a pretty tough monster right off the rip. However, he isn't incredibly difficult to the point where it's just almost impossible. He's just a monster that's going to take a little bit of time, a little bit of effort to actually get down. He has a lot of unique, interesting attacks that allow you to, or that force you to watch what you're doing. And if you can do that, then you're going to be in relatively good hands. It's not like it's the end of the world, because he's not the most difficult monster you'll fight, but he is a relatively interesting monster. And for the most part, he was himself at one point a gatekeeper, but at this time, since he's no longer in that particular position, he is right along with the tier 3 monsters. You yourself should be well equipped to fight my man. If you want to actually fight him and do quite well, you want to bring yourself a little bit of water. Again, remember that the weak spots to him is actually his head and his snout, the little thing that comes out the top of his head. That's actually his snout. Break these things and you can be rewarded with, what is it? His fang. His fangs, they're kind of tough to get. I'm mentioning this because if you're going to want to make his weapons, most part they're going to require like 4 fangs or something like that, and so that's how you get them. You don't get fangs by just completing the quest. You have to break his head. You can carve it though, so don't just dismiss all this together. You can carve the fang, but I'm just making this relatively notable because I've had a couple issues trying to get his stuff, and I was like, dude, what the heck? And that's kind of why. Now, other than that, Andrew, he does have a couple of hard-hitting attacks. He can like slam his face into the ground and drag his nose all along the ground, bulldozing the area, doing a huge amount of damage. You have to watch out for that. He does have an attack where he just kind of leaps. For whatever reason, this leaping attack, even on block, is going to do a lot of recoil damage. Well, it's going to do a lot of chip damage if you block it, and it's going to do a lot of damage if you get hit by it straight up. Other than that, stay away from his face. Well, avoid taking any frontal attacks and try doing frontal attacks yourself. He's not a very fast monster, so I'm pretty sure anyone who's using something like long sword or even insect blade, heck, dual blade, sword and shield, most fast swiping, slapping weapons should handle my man relatively fine. If you're lancing or gun lancing, bro, I'm not gonna lie to you, don't go out of your way to break the face. Break the face. Mind you, you should be able to break the face all day. You'll get a knockdown focus on the face, but just kind of land hit to where you can. Don't try to chase him down too much. He's gonna come to you. But with that said, everyone, it's been your boy Dak908, aka the Dig Dug himself, the Discord server. Ladies and gentlemen, I need you to join the Discord server. I need as many new people in there as possible because I want to make a whole bunch of new friends. And if you don't like Discord, if Discord is not your bag, I have Twitter. I want you to follow me on Twitter so we can, get to know each other a little bit better. You get to know me and know when I'm doing things, dropping more videos, so on. Whether I can't talk whether I'm in or out of like this huge creative slump or not. Twitter is the best way to know, and also Discord. So follow both Twitter and Discord. Those links will be in the description. It's been your boy Dak908. I will see you all in the next one. Take care.